Gallon?
Well, our next guest knows oil, and he says we might get close to that mark by the next presidential election. Former Shell Oil President John Hofmeister is here. He's also the author of the book, Why We Hate the Oil Company, Straight Talk from an Energy Insider. Is it possible, John, that we could get close to, $5 a gallon in the next few years?
Well, a lot of it will be driven because of the moratorium in the Gulf of Mexico. Let's be clear. After this horrible tragedy, all of the deepwater rigs were inspected. They all passed inspection, yet they were all shut down for political reasons to make the administration look like it was in charge. When you don't drill new wells, you're living off yesterday's drilling, you're living off yesterday's production potential, and it goes into decline. When there's nothing to replace it because you're not drilling, you're going to face higher crude oil prices because you're not replacing declines with new production potential. That will drive crude oil inflation.
John, is this drive toward $5 a gallon in gas prices maybe intentional by the administration, by the Democrats, because they clearly want Americans, they want to tell Americans what types of cars to drive. And this, among other moves, would seem to suggest the fuel economy, they want the fuel economy to go to, 62 miles per gallon. Do you think that they're doing this on purpose, essentially?
If they are, it is a critical strategic error on the part of their own thinking. Americans do not need to tolerate high gasoline prices because there's plenty of oil out there. And we know from 2008 that when the price reached something near $4, Americans went into open rebellion. Those who could not afford it stopped driving. It helped precipitate many home foreclosures because of the loss of disposable income. It set up a recession. And now we have this absurd moratorium, which is only at the end of phase one. We're going to have at least 3 more phases in this moratorium, starting with the regulatory uncertainty that we're living with now.
I think we have a screen we can bring up on the screen, go through those phases that you think could happen after the moratorium. We've had the moratorium itself, and then we'd have this regulatory uncertainty that you just referenced a moment ago. Then there's lawsuits, as you see it, in phase 3 to stop the permits. Talk about that, which leads us, you'll see this in a second, to phase 4, which is really where we started the conversation, higher gas prices. We're heading into phase 3 is next, I guess?
Well, no, we're going to have a long phase 2.
Oh, okay.
You know, the Secretary of the Interior has said that the rules will continue to change, that we will live in a dynamic regulatory environment. That means that the companies who would normally plan their drilling and be planning their budgets for 2011, 2012, don't know whether they can plan to drill in the Gulf or not. So all of this uncertainty will drive them to make choices to go elsewhere rather than the Gulf. The regulatory uncertainty is also complicated by the reorganization going on within the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, which will last at least a year, according to Michael Bromwich. And then we go into phase 3. When they finally announce permits to be permitted or to be operational, then the lawsuits start by environmental NGOs, which have learned to sue in the Arctic and stop permits from being implemented. They'll do the same in the Gulf. That takes us to the decline in crude oil and the higher prices.
John, in some strange way, does it make sense, though, for us to hoard what is left of this natural resource in this country if it has a finite supply, let the other countries produce their oil, sell it, and while we sit on ours and watch prices go up?
Well, there are some politicians who would like to spread the misinformation that we're running out of oil. In this hemisphere, between Canada, United States, and Venezuela, there's more than 3 trillion barrels, 3 trillion, not billion, trillion barrels of reserves that aren't counted as proven reserves. There's not any shortage of crude oil. It's going to be more expensive, it's going to be more difficult, but we're not running out. The alternatives are far more expensive. And to simply try to convince the American people that we're running out of oil, therefore it has to be more expensive, is committing fraud on the American people.
We'll leave it at that, John. Well said. John Hofmeister, thank you so much for being here. It's great to see you.
Thank you.
We can use some of John's comments.